Now we're recording there now, so we'll just wait for, we have our participants to join. Just give them a little bit of time just to join. We're a little bit early. It was good. I was just saying earlier, it was good to see that the R value seems to be in the northwest here, seems to be coming down slightly. That seems to be the news this morning, which is great. That at least we're seeing some positive move, which is badly needed, I think, for morale, really, for everybody.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Just tiny steps in the right direction, Paul.
Yeah.
I think just confidence, doesn't it?
It does indeed, because when you think about it, by the end of this, we'll have 6 weeks in lockdown effectively. Well, okay, they're not calling it lockdown, it's partial restrictions. But effectively, if you go in around the city here, for sure, you look at the footfall, it's dramatically reduced.
Yeah.
Traffic also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coming in the morning, the place is kind
okay.
of semi-deserted.
We'll just give one more minute now just for people to join, and then we'll...
There was an interesting news report yesterday, Paul. I seen Newsline. They were down in Buncrana.
Yeah.
Just doing the comparative on the border there.
I didn't see that now, Seamus. What just with the difference in lockdown between retail and non-retail and things like that were probably coming out.
Yeah, so they were down in Buncrana and just interviewing some of the retailers there, and they're all closed, non-essential or closed in hospitality,
Yeah.
Compare.
No, it is a really challenging time, and the 6 weeks of that ahead in the Republic. So yeah, really challenging, and we've been working with our colleagues in Letterkenny as well very closely recently. Yeah, so I have some stats actually from a Brexit survey we actually did, which might be useful to throw into the call today as well. So look, I think we're good to go now. So you're all very welcome to this morning's webinar. It's hard to believe, countdown to Brexit, 70 days to go. My name is Paul Clancy. I'm CEO of the London Dairy Chamber, and we're delighted that so many of you could join us today. I'm really looking forward to our session this morning, and I'm delighted to welcome Colin Mullen of Find Insurance, Deirdre McGuire of Intertrade Ireland, and Seamus Lihney of Logistics UK. Just a bit on the event overview. This is the second webinar on our Countdown to Brexit series. Our expert panel assesses the current knowns and unknowns of Brexit and how this will impact on Northern Ireland's unique trading position within Europe. And at this critical time, it is essential that businesses are clear on the steps that they need to take now. At our last webinar on the 22nd of September, which was 100 days to go, our panelists talked about the opportunities that Brexit represents for Northern Ireland as a very attractive place to do business, and the ease that we can dispatch goods to Europe with no documentation. However, as one expert said at the last call, data is the new oil, and businesses can be prepared by ensuring the correct data processes are in place ahead of the 31st of December deadline. So yeah, it's an extremely challenging time ahead for everybody, but just wanted to, and I welcome back Seamus and Deirdre again to the second webinar. Your contribution is greatly valued, and welcome Colin to this one. Just in case, if you have the option to text some questions here as we go through the webinar via the text icon at the bottom of your screen, and we'll endeavour to submit all these questions to our panel members and go through them in an orderly fashion. If you have questions that are not answered, we'll come back and we'll get back to you separately after the meeting. So before you start, if you could just mute your microphones, this will ensure minimize interference. And I'd like to introduce our expert panel this morning. So I'll start with Colin. Colin is Managing Director of Find Insurance NI. And Find Insurance NI is a Derry-based independent insurance broker specialising in commercial and personal insurance products across all sectors of industry across Northern Ireland. And Colin joined the company in 2010, and now he's Managing Director since 2017. You're very welcome, Colin. I'm really looking forward to having our chat with you. To Deirdre McGuire from Intertrade Ireland. Deirdre has a wide range of experience working with SMEs, has a Bachelor of Financial Services. She previously worked with the Ulster Bank in both retail and business banking over 20 years, and is interesting to some news about Ulster Bank this morning. That's a bit concerning in the Republic of Ireland. I heard the Finance Minister on about it. I think there's about 2,800 employees in the Republic of Ireland. That's a question mark over what Ulster Bank are going to be doing in the future. So we'll see where that brings us. And Deirdre manages the Intertrade Ireland Brexit Advisory Service and is working closely with SMEs, sharing the detail of supports available through Brexit and COVID. And that's such an important message that you're getting out there, because there's lots of things that people can tap into
Yeah.
and get supports for it. And we'll touch on those during your piece of the session this morning. And Seamus, then finally, Seamus, and again, welcome back, Deirdre and Seamus. Seamus is the Policy Manager for Logistics UK and Northern Ireland, representing the interests of businesses involved in all elements of logistics, supply chains and transport. And Seamus works involves regular engagement with national and local government on a wide range of policy matters, ranging from Brexit, compliance, sustainable transport and infrastructure. And the whole logistics is such a major part in supply management and the whole impact of Brexit. It really is challenging to understand the various nuances that are there that's coming down in January and how people can prepare in advance. And we'll touch on that as well. So Seamus, thanks again. So Colin, maybe I could start with you. I see your nice branding in the back of this, your Find Insurance.
Subtle, was it?
Subtle branding, fair play to you, that looks great. Just in terms of your business, how's the business going for you right now, Colin, at the minute, and how are you getting on?
Listen, that's we've done a lot of prep for Brexit over the last, well, up to 3 years. I suppose the conversation started. This year's been totally distracted, as we know, by COVID. Things are coming to a head now in the last month, I suppose, so Brexit is starting to come into the conversations a bit more. Undoubtedly, a major headache for us. We sit in the city here, and we have plenty of cross-border clients. Majority of what we do would be commercial insurance, so about 95% of our policyholders are commercial policyholders that are domiciled both in NI and ROI. So the unknowns, well, because we're so close to the end of their transition period, the unknowns still there are very concerning and very distracting. And we've committed a lot of resources, and both time and money, to ensure that our clients continue to be serviced correctly going forward. But again, a lot of it is speculation, because we do not know whether we're going to need the things we put in place, or whether it's been a complete waste of time and money and resource. The financial services at this point seems to me to be way down the list of priorities to be resolved. And I'm not sure if any deal that's being put in place right at the minute is going to cover our industry. An example of what we're going to have to deal with going forward is the distribution of green cards to clients. So you're talking up to about 4,000 green cards for our commercial clients and private clients that potentially we may have to administer. There's no joined up thinking between any of the insurers. We have about 20 upwards, well, more than 20 actually, motor insurers that we would use, and every one of them has a different distribution policy. So some of it will be done in a block, some will be done ad hoc, and we're just going to have to distribute it in the best ways we can. So, you know, the headache of that alone is obviously very resource hungry, and trying to learn and differentiate between each insurer's stance on how they're going to provide these green cards to us.
And Colin, you were saying about cost there. Have you had to outlay much cash to get prepared?
Well, yeah, there's costs. So listen, without going into too many details on what we're doing, we do have a number of different angles that we're going to approach. So the cost and time and resources in the business and trying to organize ourselves to get there, the cost of potentially being registered with CBI going forward, and the implications with that, and the cost of potential lost business because of where we're situated in Northern Ireland with our ROI clients. You know, and that one can't be determined yet. And it's up to us to, you know, obviously put our case forward that we, you know, are obviously a suitable commercial insurance broker to handle their needs going forward. And that, again, is a distraction.
Yeah, no, it was interesting. We did a survey with Letterkenny ourselves, and we had about 120 replies to it. And a significant proportion of the Northwest businesses, over a fifth actually, have not made any specific preparations ahead of the transition. And only 5% have signed up to the TSS, and we'll touch on that, Seamus, probably in your bit there. But there's I suppose, and Deirdre as well, in terms of supports. I know we chatted in our little rehearsal yesterday about there is an increased level of people engaging with the services, and the support services are there, but we're still coming back from a very low figure really overall in terms of how people are engaging with the system. Maybe that's a good time, Colin. Thanks very much for your input there, and I'll come back to you later with a few questions. But maybe that's a good place to move to yourself there, because certainly in any of the surveys we've done, that there's a serious lack of engagement. And you know, I can understand that, because it's a complex area to understand, and also they've been just so busy with COVID related issues.
And it's Colin actually described it very well there, Paul, because for a business they have to decide, oh, am I going to do the work, and potentially is it going to be a waste of time? You know, so resources and cash. And so at this point in time, when businesses are trying to keep afloat and manage all of the disruption caused by things like COVID, and then Brexit is here, has been here, is back, and they're saying, do I need to do this or do I just wait? And the right thing to do is to do the planning, to a little bit of it, some of it, as much as you can, rather than nothing. And I suppose, you know, when you think of the volumes of cross-border traders they are, so Intertrade Ireland looks after cross-border traders, and I mean, there's, I don't know, is it 12,000? Like, don't quote me on that figure because it changes north-south numbers, but say Northern Ireland. And, you know, we've seen a very small percentage of that coming in to ask for help. However, what I would say is over the last couple of months, we've seen a huge increase. Last year during the no deal, lots of activity for businesses asking for help. Businesses tend to wait to the very end, you know, nearly to the crunch time. And pardon me, we're nearly there. We are at the crunch time for a business. So for those who haven't done anything, I would be saying, do something, you know. Yeah.
And the type of suggestions you'd be saying, Deirdre, what can people, can you point them, steer them in a certain direction? What would you suggest that they should do? I mean, we may have touched on this in our first webinar, but it might be no harm to repeat.
Yeah. My message is the same, and it always has been. So for anybody who's heard me before, it's the same message. So for every business is different, and it depends on what you trade in and where you are in the trade. Okay. So I suppose the best way to advise a business would be identify your flow of trade. Okay, whether that is in goods or whether that is in services. And when you know exactly where your trade flows are. So for example, if you identify your trade in goods, just say it's goods, then you would be looking at if you sell to GB, if you buy from GB, if your suppliers do any of those things. So it's all about the supply chain. And again, in services, do you sell any of your services to GB, any cross-border services, because the Northern Ireland Protocol doesn't include services? Do you sell or buy any services in different jurisdictions? And that is like, it's the same as mapping your supply chain with services. You map the flow of your business and your trade. Okay, that would be the first thing that you can do. You can do this yourself, or you can seek support, and I'll give you some details on that afterwards. But to advise the company who trades in goods, and I don't want to give too much information and overload, so just a couple of examples. So if you're trading in goods, okay, first thing is look at your trade flow. Seamus will touch on the trader support service. You'll need to understand what your customs requirements will be, and you'll also need to have the data in your business ready. Paul, you mentioned it earlier. So things like your commodity codes, which could be a very small thing, and you might have them from Intrastat returns already, but you need to make sure they're right, because if they're not right, the goods will not be able to be moved properly and you could incur costs. So commodity codes, you know, there'll be things like Incoterms, which are your terms of trade. For bigger companies, they'll already know this, but companies who've never exported or imported before will need to know those things. Okay. So just as an example then for trading in services, and also for businesses, I suppose most businesses, it will be the transfer of data. So if you are sharing any personal data in the opposite jurisdiction, then you need to map that and know. So all of that will just let you know where your risk is.
Okay, just in terms, I know it's maybe Seamus, I don't know if you were familiar, I know it came up one of the webinars we were on last week, GDPR and the transfer of data cross-border. Do we have any clarity on what people should do there from a business perspective? You can map the information, all right. I'm just wondering, Seamus, if you had any clarity on that. No, I think it's a big area really that seemed to be a big question mark about the transfer of data in relation to GDPR and what rules apply NI and ROI after January 31st. December 31st.
Well, you can put international clauses in your contract, Seamus. Yeah, I would say, I don't want to overject you there, but there are things you can do. You can put international clauses in until there is a decision. Seamus, you might know more about the negotiations than I do. My understanding is they haven't come to any agreement yet, but they might.
Yeah, from my understanding, there's been no agreement on the GDPR yet. That's quite, although it's very important, it's quite low down on the priorities right now.
Yeah, it touches a bit on what Colin was talking about, the insurance thing. I mean, there are so many big things like fisheries and things they're trying to resolve. But maybe, Seamus, that's a great time to come and give you the simple question here. Will there be a trade deal? You're going to do a thesis on it, I think. We only have an hour today, unfortunately. But like, what's your you have contacts in high places. I believe you get texts at all times of the night telling you.
Oh God!
You can never reveal your sources and stuff like that. But we understand all that. But can you give us the latest update this morning?
Well, I suppose we've been fortunate enough to be dealing with government on this for quite a long time. Logistics is very important. It's critical to making Brexit work for the UK, but it's also critical to make the Northern Ireland Protocol work. And I think from day one, really shortly after the referendum result, we knew that as an industry that we were going to be extremely busy and pivotal to the whole discussion. So I suppose, first of all, I was on a webinar yesterday, an internal one with some of our members, and we have an office in Brussels and my colleague Sarah there. Certainly all the noises she is hearing in Brussels is a lot warmer language this week, a bit more positivity over there from the EU side of things, that there will be a deal. And from the UK side and in London at the NI Executive here as well, really I think the one thing I was told this week is that people are going to be acting like grown-ups now this week. And I think that we can certainly see it with the language as well between David Frost and Marko Sekovic. I think we're edging towards a deal. I think a lot of people initially, when the Prime Minister says 15th of October was the date for a deal or he'll walk away, it was never really going to be the date, because the end date that we're looking for is the 15th of November, because that's the latest possible date a trade deal can be ratified in time for the 1st of January. So I'd say we're going to have something in the next few weeks, and it'll probably happen quite quickly. There's discussions happening in the background. And then, the guys, the minions, will go into their tunnel for maybe 2 or 3 days, live on caffeine, and will come out and there'll be a deal. So fingers crossed, because at the end of the day, the protocol's here, deal or no deal. But the barriers that will between ourselves and GB, they'll be incredibly lower if we have a trade deal.
Yeah, for sure. And we touched on it before, but I mean, we to focus on the positives here, the opportunities that there are within the greater EU for businesses based in Northern Ireland. And I know we were watching that Spotlight program about British cheese was one example there that came in about potentially the cost of that coming in could be a problem in terms of trading in Northern Ireland. And they touched on a lot of questions that remained unanswered, but there are opportunities there, I guess, with having moving products from Northern Ireland into the greater Europe area. There's not a lot of administration required, so it requires a great opportunity.
There was a fantastic slide I seen yesterday. Almac, which are a huge pharmaceutical company based in Craigavon, they also have a factory in Dundalk. They actually put out, John Campbell, the BBC journalist, put out something yesterday on Twitter. And it was Almac basically just saying they had a diagram of the map of Northern Ireland and the Republic and showing their trade flows, logistics. And basically what it was saying is that under the terms of the protocol, for them, business opportunities will become a lot more plentiful because of the ease of doing business with their premises on either side of the border. They can move goods from Craigavon to the rest of the EU unfettered with no tariffs, no customs. And likewise, they'll be able to sell their products into the GB market unfettered as well. The only thing that they did acknowledge, which that Spotlight program says, is that if they were taking in, let's say, ingredients, components, packaging from GB, that there could be some form, there'll be an import declaration for that and potentially some other measures.
And that comes under that at-risk category, isn't it? The products that are at risk coming in, which ones need to be categorized and need to have the certificates.
Yeah.
And if
we have a trade
there, if there's a trade deal there, the chances are, I think you may have touched on, there might be, you were to make an example of you're producing sausage rolls, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could just repeat that example. I think it's a great idea of how this could possibly work in real terms.
Yeah, so what we're looking at, I suppose, what the EU and the UK are discussing now, it's a bit of give and take. And I think basically the EU will be looking for their take on fisheries. and the UK will be maybe some derogations on controls under the Northern Ireland Protocol, goods coming into NI. So the big one is, and Michael Goes alluded to, is supermarkets, the retail, something we've been pressing for a long time on that. And the example, I spoke to one major supermarket yesterday, is that they used the example of one simplification we're pushing for, is that if you had a sausage roll factory in Leeds, for example, sending sausage rolls to the supermarkets in Northern Ireland, well, the ingredients of that sausage rolls aren't going to change anytime soon. So rather than having to do an export health certificate for every consignment that leaves the factory bound for Northern Ireland, is that you do one export health certificate per month, and that's signed off. And that is basically under the terms that the ingredients, the way the sausage roll is made, isn't going to change. And then that EHC can be replicated automatically for every consignment shipped in. And that, if we can replicate that for all other types of products, it just makes things a little bit easier for retailers. And that's what we've got to push for. We would call the retailers here the dead end hosts, because the goods are coming in from GB into Northern Ireland and they're not going anywhere else. That's no threat to the EU. And I think the EU acknowledged that as well.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Seamus, for that. Just a question that's come in here from Paul McHugh there, based in Derry they are. Can I ask if the panel have any intel or advice for our staffing organisation, as we have staff crossing the border to work in the NHS and in other healthcare settings? Will this affect us, and how? I don't know if you would have any input onto that. It's basically about free movement of people across the border to work on either side of the border.
Paul, so the common travel area is there for people in Ireland and Northern Ireland, and there will be free movement. There's been nothing to say there hasn't been for the common travel area, so, and that's kind of outside of the negotiations. The only impact there will be, and it's not really about the travel, it's about the people in your business. If they are not from Ireland or Northern Ireland, and you know they're part of the European Union or the EEA, they may need to register for the European for their rights to live and work.
Yes.
So that's called the EU settlement scheme. But as regards travel, and if you know, common travel area should cover all that.
Okay.
The only other thing that might be an implication there for people is so it's to do with trade and services, and also qualifications. So you know, if you're contracting across the border providing a service, or if you are and it's slightly off the question, but it is relevant. If you're a lawyer or you're an auditor or you have a certain qualification, you'll need to check to see if you can actually do what you used to do in the opposite jurisdiction. So there are checks required for that.
Okay, another question came in there. Would an NI component in an EU product count as EU originating or UK originating for rules of origin purposes? Seamus, I don't know, would you be able to throw some light on that one? This is about a Northern Ireland product going in, an NI product component in an EU product.
Yeah, that's something that still has to be ironed out. Technically, yes, a Northern Ireland product is in free circulation within the EU. I suppose what we would need to consider is that would a country like, let's say, South Korea, maybe as a trade deal with the EU, if a component is coming in there and 30% of that final product is origin Northern Ireland, would they recognise that as being an EU product or part UK? And that's something we need to, I think, any trade deal has to agree on. I think principally, yes, it should be recognised as an EU, but it might just come down to the percentage. There could be a quota, maybe a level put on that, but there's nothing definitive, unfortunately, Paul, on that.
Okay. Maybe we might touch on the TSS, Seamus, there, because I know there's a target of 10,000 companies to sign up to the TSS, and I understand there's only about 2,000 right now. How does a business go about doing that and signing up to it?
Right, so the TSS have started their training now.
Which is the Trader Support Services. Sorry.
Yeah, so the Trader Support Service, it's a scheme that's going to be here for 2 years. The government's putting £200 million into it. In essence, it's akin basically to nationalising customs for goods moving between NI and GB. So what you need to do, if you simply, because I tried it yesterday, if you just go into Google and put in HMRC Trader Support Service, it'll bring you straight to the page where you register your business details. And what they'll do, they will send you alerts about webinars, online training, and also for your company to receive alerts, and then how to avail of the services. And basically what the TSS will do for you, it will have a contact center based in Belfast. So if you have a query about, the movement of goods between NI and GB, there'll be people there at the end of a phone or an email who'll be able to give you advice there and then. And then also they can help you with the processing of import declarations. So if any goods that you're moving from GB into NI, again, you give them the raw data. So what Deirdre talked about there, knowing about your commodity codes, things like that, you give that to the TSS providers. They will do the import declaration for you and then give it back to you. And because you will need that before anything leaves GB to get on a boat, it needs to have its declaration completed 2 hours before the ship sails.
So, something else that came up there was about our, custom brokers. Is it advisable if you have a small business, maybe to have somebody who's worked as an intermediary for you, who's experienced with this and is available? Because you could imagine something stuck at the port, and you're getting phone calls, and you miss that sailing, because you're just not available as a small company. You wouldn't have the resources maybe in place.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a debate a lot of companies are having now, whether they fully use the TSS or do they stick with a broker. Brokers will still be required. We'll still need brokers for doing imports and exports for goods moving between here and third countries, the rest of the world. For the TSS, I suppose what you got to consider that, let's say you have goods getting on the ferry tonight out of Liverpool at 10 o'clock at night. If there was a problem with that particular consignment, HMRC needed to know something, or the ferry company. Well, if you basically are doing that and using the TSS, you may be getting an email or a phone call at 10 o'clock at night to try and rectify something. So you've got to ask yourself, do you have the resources to deal with that? Because what you don't want to go into your office at 8 o'clock the next morning and find out your goods aren't going to be coming that morning because they didn't sail from Liverpool. So having a broker, I suppose, they take on the responsibility for that. Well, they will deal with any issues that happen at the port. So it's a bit, it's something you have to consider. Speak to your broker if you use one. A lot of brokers will probably be using the TSS as well. So, it's a bit like you're subcontracting the responsibility in some way, really. So every business themselves, Paul.
Yeah, because I guess you have that extra challenge of the Republic of Ireland being a channel for goods as well, and the paperwork that might be required for that, and the products leaving from Dublin to Holyhead, for example, which is a quite substantial number of trucks, I think, are going to be using that.
Yeah, around about 40% of agri-food products from Northern Ireland going to GB use the Dublin Holyhead route. And for anything moving Dublin Holyhead, you're going to have to do an export declaration at Dublin and an import declaration for Holyhead. And the Trader Support Service won't be able to help you with that. The TSS will only interact with GB systems, so only for shipments Larne, Belfast, Warren Point directly to GB.
I think that's a very important point, and this is where this not trying to promote custom brokers at all here now, really, don't get me wrong, but it's actually just to get the information, give you some comfort, that there are people there who could maybe manage that for you if you're struggling with information. And the TSS, obviously, you say are not going to be available to cover that. That's a substantial flow of product going through there. Colin, maybe just come back to you, if you don't mind, just in terms of what advice would you give to a business that's looking into the abyss of Brexit at the moment? What would you suggest the things they should really, any key tips that they should really look at?
Well, probably the from a commercial insurance aspect, three of the most common areas of insurance that would be covering that industry would be your motor liability and property insurance. So at the minute, this really all comes down to the authorization of the intermediaries and the insurers. So going forward, you're going to have two jurisdictions passporting rights that we have in situ at the minute, where all your EU countries can passport into each other so long as they're regulated by their home country. That will cease. Now there is a temporary permissions regime on at the minute that will continue for EU or EEA entities and intermediaries into the UK, but it hasn't been reciprocated at the minute for UK businesses. So it's something to be aware of going forward for commercial clients, whether there is the insurer that ultimately insures those entities have the capacity to continue to cover that. Now, At the minute, I don't think there will be a significant change. So if you're talking about your tier one insurer, so brand names that you'll be aware of, Aviva, Zurich, Alliances, etc., will all have entities in each of these countries, or the countries that are more focused here, as in ROI. So the only remit they have in presence, so an NI company that trades in the south, the majority of their business needs to be transacted in the UK. So they have anything less than 50% is probably acceptable. So if you've got a fleet with vehicles on it, less than 50% need to be registered, or each insurer. Well, it's not set in stone for each insurer. There's own caveats in that. Your turnover, if your turnover is greater than 50% in ROI at the minute, you probably wouldn't be acceptable to a UK insurer anyway. So that doesn't really change. But the shifting sands in this, and halfway into next year, if the Armageddon hits and there's no deal, albeit Seamus is confident there, and it gives us a bit of hope. At that stage, well, prior to that, you really need to be finding out who you're insured with and what their stance is, and through your insurance broker, maybe they can guide and help sort of differentiate that for you. So the fleet thing is something that, or even small motor or individual motor. So if you're a motor trader, or you run a haulage business, and I know there's a lot of chopping and changing of vehicles, and it can be done very quickly. So you get a change of vehicle on a Friday evening to drive into ROI over the weekend. Contacting your broker to get that put on to your insurance is okay, but the green card that I alluded to earlier may not be available just as imminently as you would anticipate, because some are manually distributing these. Some will come on paper format, some will come on a PDF. I suppose we've had a bit of grace in that they now don't need to be green, because there was a clamour for buying green paper at a stage last year, so we could print them out properly. But that thankfully isn't there. But logically, you would think that an electronic version would be the way to go forward. But the industry can be quite antiquated sometimes, and that just isn't acceptable. So that needs to be aware of. So people that are making changes and they have access to the motor insurance database to put their vehicles on, still doesn't guarantee that they will have access to a green card as quickly. So
okay, so just check your broker, make sure they're authorized.
Just check, just check and make sure that if you have everybody's forward plan, your 1, 3, and 5 year business plan, but in the next 12 months or 18 months, and you see a significant change in where you are going to be working, most so take a contractor, for example, and maybe shifts focus from UK into the south, and whether that NI registered business then totally changes or transforms in the eyes of an insurer, because it's a totally different jurisdiction and different legislation and laws and stuff like that. That affects then the risk substantially for the insurer, and they may not.
Okay, thanks.
Agree to that. So
that's great, Con. Thanks very much. That's very practical advice there. Thank you for that. Just another question that's come in there: is there any help for transit goods from ROI to EU through the land bridge of GB and vice versa? Concerned about time sensitive products that might perish in queues at short straits. And maybe Seamus, would you be able to take that one for us?
Yeah, that's something the Irish government are really pushing for people, if possible, to cut out the land bridge. There is an increase in schedule now between Rosslare and Cherbourg. I think they're going, it's an every other day service. They're looking, I think they're up in a daily service. And the Irish government are going to subsidise that route. The only difference is if you're moving goods, let's say from Derry to Paris, you can do it in 20 hours today if you go via the land bridge. But if you go via, let's say, Dublin, Cherbourg, you're looking at a 40-hour transit time. So so if you're lifting a load of seafood in Greencastle, you have no option. You have to take the land bridge. Going transit, what you have to do, you have to raise a transit accompanying document. It's a T2 document. There's two types of transit document. And what that will do, the T2 document will mean that when your goods leave Dublin and arrive into Holyhead, it's telling HMRC the goods are not destined for the UK. So there's no import declaration due or no tariff due. And then they clock out at Dover into Cali. The problem is, and this is probably the quite ironic thing with transit, there'll be a smooth transit in GB. Holyhead and Dover are going to use ANPR cameras. So the ANPR camera will correspond with the transit document. The problem is when you get into Cali, to check transit, the Office of Transit is actually further inland. It's not at the port. So you have to drive about 10 kilometers away from the port. go to a processing lorry park and just get it clocked in there, the goods. So it should be, you know, barring a disaster in Kent, which could happen.
Would happen, yeah.
Yeah, I think some people might decide to cut out the land bridge, but it all comes down to the time sensitivity of your cargo.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's well answered there. Thanks for that, Seamus. Deirdre, maybe I could come back to you just about vouchers. You mentioned there might be some vouchers available. I think you touched on it the last call that can support businesses.
Yeah, so just on listening again, and it always blows me away when I hear of all of the things that a business has to think about and consider, because, you know, it could be logistics, it could be your insurance, it could be down to the format of your invoice, to your terms of trade, which are your Incoterms, to your codes, to the employment of your staff. Pretty much everything here may have an impact on different businesses depending on what you're in. So there are supports. Obviously, Intertrade Ireland is not the only body. So first of all, Intertrade Ireland have £2,000 worth of fully funded voucher support, and that will get you access to a consultant who will go in and almost look at the risks in your business. You can use it for lots of things. I mean, you could have it if you've done some planning and there was something you particularly wanted to focus on, like maybe it's company jurisdiction. Should I set up a new company in the opposite, you know? So, or it could be getting the codes for you, or it could be, you know, assessing your customs or your services problems. They can do pretty much any of those things. And the vouchers are, you can apply online. Again, I'll share the link, Paul.
That's great.
Very easy to do. And the governments in the north and the south fully fund this scheme as well. Other things that I would say in terms of supports, I would, obviously there are people on the webinar today, but you always learn when you attend a webinar. So I would be saying, go to as many webinars as you can, learn for yourself and your business. And also then InvestNI have supports if you're one of their clients. And some of the local councils have like mentoring programs as well. And all of those things will be ramping up over the weeks ahead. Intertrade Ireland will be having a webinar in early November. I know InvestNI have EU stakeholder workshops. Again, Intertrade Ireland will be at those. Newry Moore and District Council is just one that comes to mind, you know, so the different councils will have lots of things coming on. So I would be saying for the Intertrade Ireland summary supports, I'll send you the link for that. It's £2,000 worth of fully funded support for a cross-border trader.
No, that's brilliant, Deirdre. Thanks very much for that, and welcome support, no doubt, for a lot of businesses. And it's great there is that contact point really for a business who are, I suppose somebody can come in and do an audit on their business and see where their exposure is.
Yeah,
that's very comforting for sure.
Yeah, we do also have digital content. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. And
Yeah.
there is some things there, and it will be built upon over the weeks ahead, actually. So if you're a business and you wanted to have a look at an import declaration, there's like little videos in behind under customs where you can actually see it. We even have a sample invoice in there, and there's also information on, you know, how to find your commodity codes and things on Incoterms, your terms of trade, and also rules of origin if and when they do become part of your day-to-day business. So the digital information is on, I'll send you the link to that as well. Brexit 2020 is the name of the site.
That's fantastic. I'm just looking to see if there are any more questions coming through. There aren't at the moment. I'm just wondering, Seamus, is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up? Any particular points of support or advice?
It's making sure, maybe, you know, Deirdre probably covered there, making sure you have your ERI number, your EOIR number. You can't obviously as a business, an importer or exporter, move anything without that. Obviously looking up your commodity codes as well, just that ease of transit. And I suppose looking, you know, going forward, really, it's all about just registering with the TSS right now. Get on that today. If you haven't registered, like you said, you know, the target's 10,000 businesses here really should be on it, and we only have 2,000 on it. So I think when I speak to a lot of people in the haulage business here, there's a feeling maybe from a lot of their clients that, listen, you're the haulier, you'll take care of all this for me, but fundamentally it's not. It's the responsibility of the consignee or the consignor. The carrier haulier facilitates that and will help, but at the end of the day, you know, the responsibility lies with the trader.
Yes, exactly. Deirdre, anything else you'd like to add in just before we finish up?
No, I would just say do something.
Okay, good.
First, and then something after that.
And Colin, from your point of view, I guess it's a challenging time. Let's hope we get a trade deal. I guess is very important, and to get from your particular perspective that the clarity comes as soon as possible for your business.
Yeah. No, the sooner the better. I suppose Seamus has put a bit of a clarification on when exactly the deal will be done. In mid-November, I was anticipating with Boris procrastinating that it was going to be middle of October, but again, it's negotiations, you know, and the real deadline is, as you say, the 15th of November to get that deal ratified. So, you know, it doesn't give us much time, and you take 2 weeks out of Christmas for you know, staffing requirements and people taking breaks and holidays and trying to get ourselves into a position where we can handle requests and things that will be coming through. So, and
whatever deal is landed on, I guess what they call it a skinny deal is going to be fairly light on content. I mean, some of the big issues will be agreed in principle, and they might move forward on that. When everything is going to take some time to, there might be another, I mightn't call it a transition, but there might be something coming January which will allow time to get all the.
Well, that would be, yeah, that'd be preferable. We get some temporary permission regime extension as is, you know, sort of granted to EU countries coming into the EU or the UK at the minute. If we get that reversed, or not reversed, but a reciprocal deal, then that would obviously take a lot of pressure off and give everybody a bit of time to go and do what they need to do in regards to authorization.
Seamus has promised too that as he gets all this information coming in from the tunnels, that he's going to forward it on to me and text messages, and we're going to find out what's happening in that tunnel.
I would agree there. You know, I think Colin's kind of had it nailed on the head. The time's against us here. The Trader Support Service goes live about a week before Christmas. Not ideal timing. The border control posts, so at the points of entry at Larne, Belfast and Warrenpoint, for goods of animal or plant origin coming in here, they have to abide by the regulatory controls and the checks. You know, we haven't got the border control posts built yet. Now, the tenders were awarded for the construction of those only last Friday, and 3 construction firms locally have won the contracts. From my understanding, they're going to start site preparations next week at the 3 ports. But I've seen the spec of these control posts, and you know, some people think it'll be a few porta cabins thrown together. It's not. It's high specification, 2-story building with offices, staff facilities, almost like a sterile lab facility to check food coming off the back of a lorry with chilled and frozen storage. It's not something you can just clobber together. It's not like an IKEA flat pack piece of furniture, you know. And I think we might need, you know, with a deal, the EU might say, okay, we'll do a phased implementation. The BCPs don't need to be ready until July next year or something like that, and that gives us a bit of room, ideally.
Yeah, I think there's going to have to be some compromise there in order to make this work. I think that's what's going to be I'd love to be a fly on the wall in that tunnel to see what's going to happen. But look, we leave it to the politicians, hopefully, to get a positive solution for us all, because with COVID-19 and everything else is going on, we really do need a positive end to this game. So look, on behalf of the Chamber, I'd like to thank our panel members, Colin, Deirdre and Seamus, for their insights into Brexit and the supports that are available to us and what business can do now to prepare. And I think that was the message that we gave at the first Brexit webinar. And we are planning to have another one in with 50 days to go on the 10th of November. I don't know if we've said that to you, Deirdre or Seamus, yet, but you might be invited back. But look, what we're trying to do is keep continuity and keep the messages going through and keep that information flowing. And as Deirdre said, if we can do that, hopefully we can support our members. So we really appreciate it. And Colin, thanks so much for your time as well. Your schedule as well to support the Chamber. There will be recording of the webinar this morning, and we'll send it on to our members so they can tap into it. And we are obviously here as a Chamber to support our members in any way that we can during this very difficult period. I think that's about it for the day, unless there's anybody else has any particular questions. I don't see anything on the chat. So I just wish you all a very good afternoon, and thanks again for joining. Take care.
Okay.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.